WWGP welcomes you to the final day of our candidate interviews. We want to thank The Rant for partnering in this interview format to help spread the word and keep our community better informed. We thank Brick Capital Video for bringing a quality presentation to our viewers, and our directors Laura Vest and Chris Morris for our radio and Facebook shows. Wilson, Reeves & Silverman, attorneys at law, and Sanford Real Estate have brought you these interviews this week, and we thank them for being a part of our candidate interviews. Today's candidates for the Lee County Board of Education in order are Democrat Lynn Smith, Republicans Sherry Lynn Womack, Todd Ashley Miller, and Eric Davidson, Democrats Tom Fry, Patrick Kelly, and Jamie Ladotti, and Republican Sandra Bowen. Interviewers Matt Garrett and John Ramsberger will share the interview duties for today. We now take you to the WFJA studio and interviewer Matt Garrett.
Good afternoon and welcome to Day 5 of our local candidate interviews, brought to you live by Sandhills Broadcasting, WFJA and WWGP, The Rant, with radio provided by Brick Capital Video. We are here in the studio at WFJA. I'm Matt Garrett, and along with John Ramsberger later today, we will be your host for today's interviews. Before we start with our first interview, I remind you that you can listen to our interviews today on WFJA 105.5 FM, WWGP 1050 AM, and 95.1 FM. These interviews today are also video streaming live on the WFJA Facebook page, as well as the Facebook page for The Rant. Today we will be talking with 8 candidates running for the Lee County Board of Education. We begin our session with Democratic candidate Lynn Smith. So, Dr. Lynn, welcome, sir, to WFJA and to our candidate interviews.
Good afternoon, Matt. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you for taking your time to conduct these interviews. And I certainly want to thank John Hockaday and Sandhills Broadcasting for making this available. And it's particularly important this year because personal interviews, personal forums are not possible. So this is really our only means to get ourselves and our messages out to the public. So thank you so very much for making this available.
Yeah, these are strange times with this coronavirus, and here I am hiding behind my mask as we talk. But anyway, we're going to get the job done, aren't we?
Yeah, and I have a mask just to be socially correct.
There you go. And you certainly, I saw you wearing it coming in, but right now we want the viewers to be able to see what a handsome gentleman you are. So there we go.
You're very kind.
All right. Well, Lynn, I have known you a long time because back in your days as an orthodontist, you actually treated 2 of my children, and now they have beautiful teeth. Thank you. And but I'm sure that there are many of our listeners who do not know you and other members of the community. So why don't we begin by letting you just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you began to serve on the school board to start with.
Well, Matt, I've been involved in Lee County education for a long time. I came to Sanford in 1972 with my family. I had just finished my residency in orthodontics at Chapel Hill, and we had 2 children, and of course we enrolled them in Lee County public education, and subsequently all 3 of my children graduated from Lee County High School and went on to have very successful careers, for which I'm very grateful for their educational opportunities. At the moment, in addition to my children, I have 8 grandchildren, 3 of whom are currently enrolled in Lee County school system. So not only do I have an elected interest in Lee County public education, but I also have a vested interest in that I want for my grandchildren the very best they can receive, as for every child that's enrolled in Lee County public education. In 2005, probably the best thing that's happened in my lifetime is my son Brian, Dr. Brian Smith, joined my practice of orthodontics. That was in 2005, and of course, with his arrival, it freed up some time for me to do some things that I had not done before. And in 2006, Mary Ellen Axner resigned from her 4-year term on the Lee County Board of Education. And Jane and I sat down, and she said, "Why don't you do it?" So I applied for that to fill out her remaining 2 years. The board selected me. At that point in time, our board was nonpartisan, meaning that the Board of Education selected her replacement, and I'm very grateful for that start. And here I am all these years later. I've served that partial 2-year term and 3 successive terms. Probably the highlight of my career with the board is the 4 years that I served as chairman. And we did some fairly notable things during that 4-year term, one of which was hiring Andy Bryan as superintendent. And Dr. Bryan has just done an outstanding job through the years, but particularly during this pandemic, he has put together a solution to our problems. Of course, there's no precedent. We've never been here before. We've never done this before. And I am just really proud of his leadership during this pandemic. Also, during that 4-year span when I was chairman of the board, we picked Wicker School to be the site of our new elementary school. I think that was a huge accomplishment for our board. We selected that site to build our new school, to eliminate the crowding in our elementary schools, which we did, and it preserved the heritage of the original Wicker School, of which I'm very proud, and really put a whole new face on that particular part of our community. So those are kind of the highlights of my career. And here I am asking the citizens of Lee County to give me 4 more years, and hope the Lord lets me stay here long enough to do that.
Well, now that leads me right into a question. You know, these are days when there are folks who say that we ought to put term limits on people in political offices. I'm wondering how you feel about that as a long-term board member. Do you think we ought to limit terms of school board members, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, interesting question. Certainly, generically, I would support term limits. However, I will wiggle a little bit in that in local races like this one, I don't think we need term limits, nor do I think that we need to be partisan. In a board of education, in a community the size of ours, we know everybody. And if I do something that is not in the best interest of the students we serve, I firmly believe the citizens of Lee County would show me an exit to the door, which would be the same as term limits. Of course, I realize that's kind of vacillating a little bit, and I apologize. But on a national scale, yeah, I can think of some circumstances that I would support term limits.
Right. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges in our schools right now is dealing with this pandemic and trying to get the schools reopened and the kids back in school. And maybe we'll have a chance to talk about that in a minute. But first, I was wondering, other than the pandemic, what do you think are some of the greatest issues or challenges that the Lee County schools are dealing with now?
Oh, for sure. For me, the biggest concern I have outside of the pandemic is the loss of learning that has occurred during this thing. There's no question we lost all of our spring semester last year, and just today, our second and third grade students are returning to school. So we're beginning to move back to some sense of face-to-face education, but this loss of learning, I'm afraid, is going to haunt us for a time to come. Of course, the entire world is in the same boat we are, so it's not like we're losing ground. But when it gets down to the individual student and what he takes home, I am really concerned with this loss of learning. I made this comment to a parent recently, and it wasn't received too well. If we're really serious about this loss of learning, we could even use summers to matriculate our children and try to get them back up to speed. But we'll make it up. It's going to be difficult, but it's that loss of learning that really bothers me most. The second thing that bothers me most is our teachers. And of course, that's pandemically related. I get that. But, what is our teaching corps going to look like after this is over? Where are new teachers going to come from? Every day they're putting a target on their backs to go to the classroom, and we need to protect them, and we need to think of some innovative ways to increase our teaching corps and keep our teachers and recruit new teachers for the time when this is going to be over.
Okay. Another issue that I've had some people ask me about, I remember back when they were first talking about year-round schools. I went to hear the superintendent back then having some parent meetings and community meetings just to discuss the issue. And of course, we went on and established Tramway Elementary School, which now, years later, is still the only year-round calendar school. There are folks who feel like we probably ought to add more, maybe have a middle school and a high school in the same calendar. Does this get discussed much in the school board, and what would be your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that year-round school would be a very innovative thing for our children, and I would frankly support it. However, as I say that, I remember a time a few years ago when our calendar committee decided that on their own they were just going to make the jump and recommend converting all of our elementary schools to year-round schools. That turned out to be the most controversial thing that's happened during my tenure. We had a public hearing for the entire board, and my good friend Mr. Bill Tatum asked me to chair that meeting, and the entire auditorium at Lee County High School was full of people mad as a hornet. I mean, mad as a hornet. Don't mess with my summer vacation. So, educationally, I think it would be a brilliant thing to do, particularly in this circumstance. But historically, I think the majority of people in the county would not support it. And in fact, the surveys that we've sent out, particularly to have a middle school to complement Tramway School as a year-round facility, we only got about a 30% return of positive returns. So I don't think citizens of Lee County are very much in favor of year-round schools.
Okay.
Other than what we have now, Tramway's a huge success. Don't get that wrong.
Right.
It's huge.
And the parents there and the kids there seem to love it.
They do. They do.
I'm a little biased. I've got 3 over there.
And of course, these days the big item, the big word in education is choice, and we all don't march to the same drummer, and some people Tramway and year-round schools work, and for some people it does not.
Right. Let me ask about another issue in the schools. I remember back when there was a teacher's aide in just about every elementary class, and then the state continued to do budget cutbacks in education. The counties were forced to find ways to make ends meet, and so over time we have seen fewer and fewer teacher's aides in the schools. Can anything be done to bring them back, or maybe there are other ways to help support those elementary teachers without teachers' aides?
That would have to come from the legislature. That is determined in Raleigh, and you're right. Our TAs have decreased over the years, and the philosophy, I assume, was to put money in the teachers' pockets rather than spend it on teachers' aides. But I think teachers' aides are a huge asset to the educational process, and I would certainly encourage our legislature to reconsider hiring more teachers' assistants.
As a long-term school board member, what ways have worked best for you to be able to stay in touch with the concerns of parents and students and other community citizens?
Got to listen. You just got to be there. Someday I'll count how many emails and phone calls I've received recently. Well, of course, last spring it wasn't so bad because it was all new and nobody knew what was going on. But as we have approached getting our kids back in face-to-face education, I wish I knew how many correspondents I have had urging me to go one way or the other, just expressing their concerns. And I think an open door and an open ear is the only way to know what's going on in our community.
Okay. Lynn, we've only got a minute left. Let me give you an opportunity. Is there something that you would like to talk about related to the school board that maybe I didn't think to ask you?
I don't. This has been terrific, and I'd like to stay all afternoon, Matt, if we could. But it has been an absolute pleasure and an honor to serve on the Lee County Board of Education for all these years. And we've got a lot of good stuff going. Our kids are coming back. I hope that the voters will give me another 4 years to do this. And I certainly want to thank John Hockaday and you for being here and making this available to the public.
It's been a lot of fun talking with
It has.
you, and haven't seen you in a while to talk, so it's nice to catch up on each other.
You tell your grandchildren hello from me.
I will, and I wish you the best in the upcoming election.
Thanks so much.
Well, we would like to thank Lynn Smith for his time today and for this candidate interview, and we're going to take only a 60-second break, and when we come back, we will be talking with our next candidate, Sherry Lynn Womack.